And a girl who thinks critically is far more dangerous to a dictatorship than any weapon.
Lamar Zala Gran is an Afghan women's rights activist.
And religion as well. Sometimes the people just use it as a way to control woman body or woman's decision.
When did you first realize silence was no longer an option?
When silence began to feel heavier than fear. But unfortunately, in Afghanistan, women are being arrested or women are not allowed to go to school. Men are still silent. And removing headscarf wasn't a rejection of faith, but it was a rejection of coercion. But very quickly, I understood that silence wasn't protecting us, it was helping erase us. Iran is in our neighborhood. We always show solidarity for Iranian people. We share the same culture, the same language, the same tradition.
What keeps you personally going when the cost of resistance is so high?
Well, I feel like the girl who told me that they're still studying in secret, the woman who says that your voice makes me feel less alone. As long as they're silenced, I will not be silenced.
Welcome to Not Silent Podcast. Afghan women are living under one of the harshest systems of gender repression in the world. Girls are banned from schools and universities, erased from public life, and punished for speaking out. This is not tradition. This is systematic oppression. And our guest today refused to accept that. Lamar Zala Gran is an Afghan women's rights activist. She is an international student in the United States and the founder of Empowering Afghan Women. Lamar helped Afghan girls continue their education through online learning, often in secrecy at great personal risk. Her advocacy placed her in danger and she was forced into exile. She escaped Afghanistan in 2022. Lamar's work is about more than survival. It's about resistance through education, dignity, and the refusal to let a generation of girls disappear. Lamar, welcome.
Thank you so much, Arbana, for having me in this crucial podcast.
Thank you. Can you take us back to the beginning? When did you first realize that staying silent was no longer an option for you?
I realized it when silence began to feel heavier than fear. After the Taliban returned to power, everything changed overnight for me and for other girls. Schools closed, women disappeared from public spaces, and our existence became conditional. At first, like many people, I tried to stay quiet, to stay safe, but very quickly I understood that silence wasn't protecting us; it was helping erase us. When you watch girls being stripped of their futures and you say nothing, that silence become a form of participation. I couldn't live with that. Speaking out became the only way I could remain human in a human system.
So you have seen that probably in your family, in your neighbor, you have witnessed what was happening. So everything changed over the night. Do you have a moment that turned you from a student or a young woman into an activist?
Well, the moment that turned me from a student to a young activist, I feel like it was never planned to be an activist. I never planned to be an activist. I was a student with dreams, with education, with career, with all those independence. I'm still a student with all those my career and my independence. But the Taliban decriminalized those dreams. The moment girls were banned from schools, from universities, my identity as a student no longer existed. I wasn't allowed to simply be that student. In that moment, resistance wasn't ideological. It was more kind of like a survival. I didn't choose activism. I feel like activism chose me when the state decided that my gender made me illegal.
Did you had support from family? Because I know you were young, you're still very
Hmm.
young. So
Yeah.
how did you realize how dangerous was it to start advocating for women's rights in Kabul under the Taliban? Did you fully understand the risk at the time?
I fully understood the risk at the time. I even remember I used to invite some of the journalists, or I was doing all these hybrid educational platform for these girls and women. I'm still speaking out. The first time I invited a Los Angeles Times journalist in our house, my family was there. They didn't say anything. They didn't even criticize me so far for the work I'm doing. They give me full support. My parents are so proud of my work and the help that I do for Afghan women and young people over there. Even I remember in 2020, 2022 or it was 2023. In 2023, when I spoke on an international platform like United Nations International Youth Day, my family was still in Afghanistan. When I called my dad, I was like, I'm going to speak on this International Youth Day, where I would speak with the president of General Assembly, and it's a big platform. I mean, are you going to risk your life? And because I'm going to risk everybody's life, so are you okay with that? So my father was like, you have all my support. Go ahead and speak up for your young people in Afghanistan, for all the people who is silenced in Afghanistan. So I feel like even throughout my education, my career, and my activism, my parents, they gave me all their support. Even the other day, I was in a documentary that was created by the Students for Liberty, a libertarian organization here in United States. They made a documentary about my life and activism. And my brother sent this to me, and he said that my son is so proud of you. So it was I feel like a moment of, like, I gave all my energy and all my people, they keep asking me why you're so energetic, why you're so active about Afghan women, about young people back in Afghanistan. The only reason that I'm getting all my energies. It's actually from my family and from my friends, everybody who is close to me.
And you also lived there and you know what it means to be under this regime. For people here, it's very difficult to understand what it means to live under the authoritarian regime. And coming from that part of the world, living it, you understand. And that's why you probably get that courage to speak up and knowing that, as you said, you are concerned because your family is still there. But when did you decide to leave Afghanistan?
I decided to leave Afghanistan. It was 2021. I first went to the airport in 2021 when the Taliban come into power. I did multiple attempts of escaping Afghanistan, and all of them failed. I remember even in 2021, at the night when the Taliban took over Kabul, during the night, I decided to leave together with my family. We went to the Kabul airport, and we weren't able to flee from there because there was a lot of conflicts happening between Taliban and the U.S. troops. They were shooting towards each other, and it almost failed. My second attempt was, there was like, I did a lot of attempts. It wasn't just like one or two or three or four or five, because I was a part of American University of Afghanistan students as well. They evacuated me to Qatar, but before that we went to the airport. We weren't allowed to leave Afghanistan because we didn't have a male chaperone during that time, and they even locked us in the Kabul airport terminal for 7 or 6 hours, and that evacuation also failed. Then they sent us back together with our suitcases back to our homes. And even before sending us to back to our homes, they actually blocked our exit visa, and they even insulted us. They
Who
told
did
many of,
this? You are talking about Taliban.
yes, the Taliban, they, all of them, they did this, and they told us that we know, they know that once we leave Afghanistan, we're gonna go and marry Americans or white people. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. The only reason we were leaving Afghanistan was for the purpose of education, to have the right freely to go to schools and universities.
So they
Mhm.
kept you isolated until they sent you back
They
to
sent
the.
us back. Yes. Yes, and there was a lot of negotiation happening between Taliban representative and Qatari representative. So the only reason they released us was because of Qatari representatives.
So were there international involved or not?
I feel like internationally people were involved. That was the reason they released us. If we didn't have any support, anything could happen with us during that time.
So you went back home and then after how
I was living in a safe house, so I went back to that safe house.
so and
That safe house was supported by American Evacuation Company.
was it safe there knowing that it was supported by Americans? Did Taliban knew?
I mean, sometimes it feels safe, but sometimes when there was house to house raid that started, it felt unsafe because we had to burn all our documents. We had to hide our documents. Sometimes we travel to other parts of Kabul to our relatives' house to keep that document safe. Not only us, but also our documents, because those documents, It helped us to actually apply for asylums in other countries. So that was the only reason that we kept our documents hidden and more
It's your
safe.
identity, basically. So
Basically,
you personally faced the Taliban.
yes, yes. Like for like 1.5 year, I faced them every day, and not just like once, or like I faced them every day. Even for the first time when I saw Taliban, it was really scary for me as a person who lived in a rural area like Kabul. It was a completely emotional shock for me. The way that they dress, the way that they speak, everything was so scary for me.
How old were you at the time?
At the time, I was like 16 or 17.
So you were a child and you had to face them.
Mhm.
So what happened after?
After that, 2022, after my evacuation from Kabul airport it failed, I decided to travel to Pakistan border, and my father he accompanied me until like the Pakistan border. After I passed the border, before that, my father convinced the Taliban members that this is my son on the other side of border who's going to pick up my daughter, and that was the reason they allowed me to travel from Pakistan border to pass from Pakistan border to Pakistan. And after that, I got my flight tickets from American University of Afghanistan. And then I flew from Pakistan to Qatar. And that was my story of how I escaped or how I managed to leave Afghanistan.
You came to the United States. What were you doing at the time? Did you had people that helped you here? So you started asylum basically, and you were very young. So you traveled all alone. Did you have any support?
When I come to United States, I come through a scholarship. So I have my college support, but I work as well. I don't have anybody. I'm just on my own. Uh, I mean, that's the United States life. You have an individualistic life where nobody helps you. You have to help yourself. But when I come to United States, I didn't have anybody. I come here through a scholarship. After that, my college, they basically cover my tuition, accommodations, and everything. And during my summertime, I basically do internships or work. And during my breaks, I literally work. Um, so yeah, this is how I try to survive in my life. So basically I didn't have anybody to help me, but I would definitely say that my college, they support me a lot through their scholarship program and other opportunities.
But you continued your activism. You were speaking up at the UN events. So why do you think authoritarian regimes fear education of the girls so much?
I feel like it's incredibly dangerous. Advocacy, it means like surveillance, threats, being followed, and knowing that a risk could happen at any moment. The Taliban, they doesn't tolerate dissent, especially from women. At the time, I understood that risk intellectually, but emotionally, you can never fully comprehend it when it means to live under constant fear until you experience it. And every message, every meeting, every post could have been the last. You live with the understanding that life is unexpected and under that regime. But I feel like the when the schools are closed and when you refuse to the right of education and you let education disappear. So this is why we created all these online platform for these Afghan women. But I feel like the only reason that the Taliban they are fear of all these educated women because educating girls they challenge their obedience. The question is power, understanding their rights and imagine alternatives. An authoritarian regime, they survive on control, not consent. And so when girls are educated, they stop accepting oppression as destiny. And a girl who thinks critically is far more dangerous to a dictatorship than any weapon.
And they want to control like this. So what did you see happening to the girls emotionally when education was taken away from
Those girls they were hopeless. They didn't have any idea what they were going to do. They were 24/7 locked in their houses. And emotionally it's really hard for them to live under regime and that regime, and sometimes it even led to early child marriages because in Afghanistan nowadays you see there's a lot of early child marriages are happening, and this would lead to normalization of that kind of ideology, that kind of environment for many people, especially for men. They will start normalizing that educating girls being uneducated is completely normal. And emotionally it's really hard for them because they lose their dreams. The majority of them, they have the dream of becoming a doctor. Sometimes they have the dreams of becoming like engineers, pilots, lawyers. They have like a lot of dreams, but sometimes they literally, like all of them, they literally oppress all those dreams, and those dreams no longer matter for them. So the only thing that they will do is just oppressing those dreams, and the majority of them, they choose to do marriages just to save themselves from those kind of like situations. The majority of them, they don't even, like, I talk with a lot of women in Afghanistan, and sometimes they tell me that even their families, some of their families, they don't even allow them to go to abroad for education. Some families, they are very supportive. They allow their daughters to travel outside Afghanistan, to come to a state or to Europe or other part of the world for educational purposes. But sometimes their families, they're so protective or conservatives that they don't want to see their daughters studying in abroad.
We see this control also in other Muslim countries. Do you think it's religion or is tradition that is trying to control women and not let them be educated and have freedom?
I mean, I feel like it's more like traditional, because most of the time I have seen that most of these oppressive man or oppressive regimes, they use religion as a source of oppression. But I feel like religion is, it's a personal relationship. It's a spiritual relationship that every individual person, they have with God, with their faith, and this should be a choice. Whether a person wants to be an atheist, whether a person wants to be Muslim, or they want to choose another religion, it needs to be a choice. But I feel like it's mostly, it's mix of both of them. It's traditional and religion as well. Sometimes the people just use it as a way to control woman body or woman's decision, just as a way to support patriarchy, to continue this cycle of controlling and oppression. And this usually, it destroys woman mental health, a woman's capacity and woman's ability as well. And mostly when it comes to decision making, man, they always want to be higher than everybody in this kind of society and this kind of environment. And this will lead women to escape those kind of societies. They just want to lose all those identity, all those cultures, and they don't want to even accept those cultures and identity. And this is happening to a lot of Afghan women. After they leave Afghanistan, they're even embarrassed, they're even shame of having that identity and culture. I feel like our culture is so beautiful, but we don't want to use those beauty of our culture. The only thing that we want to use nowadays in our society is just oppression and more control over people's choices, identity, and decisions, especially women's decision.
So when I've met you, I think a year or 2 years ago, you were wearing headscarf.
Mhm.
You made the decision to remove your headscarf. This is deeply personal, but also deeply political. What led you to that decision?
I mean, the decision was deeply personal. I grew up understanding, as I told before, faith as a personal relationship of me with God, not something that it's enforced through fear or violence. After watching women beaten, imprisoned, and erased in the name of modesty, I needed to reclaim that my body or my choices are my own. And removing headscarf wasn't a rejection of faith, but it was a rejection of coercion, basically.
Was this an act of resistance?
I feel like both act of resistance and my own choice as well.
What do you did you had reaction from your family or other Muslim people around you? Did you receive any threat when you made this decision?
I mean, when I made this decision, a lot of my conservative friends, they stopped talking with me. I had a lot of arguments with a lot of my friends, but most of my family members, they respected that choice. And even my Muslim friends around me, I thought that most of the people, they would react, but a lot of people around me, they were quite respectful to that decision.
So both the Taliban and we are seeing what is happening in
Mhm.
Iran with Iranian regime claim to act in the name of Islam. As a woman from the region, how do you respond to that claim?
I mean, how do like I show deeply like solidarity for Iranian people. The fact is that in Iran, the good thing is like even man, they're supporting their woman. We don't have it in Afghanistan, and I feel like in Iran, their man is literally supporting them in their advocacy, in their rights. A lot of them they stood for Iranian women. A lot of them they supported that cause. But unfortunately, in Afghanistan, women are being arrested or women are not allowed to go to school, men are still silent. And that silence basically it gives it like a proper support of like to the regime. So I feel like I realize it that it's important that man should also support their women in that cause, their people. But I feel like but it's so like our culture is so close with Iran, and it's good to see that people are reacting. We have seen like so far we have seen a lot of Gen Z's protests all around the world. In Nepal, they overthrown their government. We saw Gen Z protest in Morocco to overthrow their government, and we see that good thing in Iran as well, where they try to overthrow their government. And hopefully, I hope like there would be a stable regime would come in Iran where their government would support their people causes, bring modernization in the country, democracy, and a good economic stability as well. Because we see there's a lot of sanctions happening in Iran where they will open trade with other countries. Iran is in our neighborhood. We always show solidarity for Iranian people. We
Yeah.
share the same culture, the same language, the same tradition, and we have so many things in common with Iranian people. There are some racism happening towards Afghan refugees in Iran. Totally condemn that. But still, as a neighbor, we show a lot of solidarity for Iranian people, despite of their.
Because you were both suffering under the regimes that basically they were using religion. So when you were talking about men supporting women, and we are seeing massive protests in Iran, when you have also men, their brothers, their husbands supporting them, we don't see this in Afghanistan. Is this more of the cultural thing, that more traditional families, as you were saying, yes, it is Taliban regime that takes decision, but also within the families, you had the support of your father, but not
Yes.
every girl has the support of their family. So can you make the comparison between you not having this support, while we see the women in Iran that they are having a massive support from males also?
Yes, there is the massive support of Iranian man with the Iranian woman. But as you said, there's a lot of families in Afghanistan where they don't support their woman, they don't support their daughters or sisters. We see that in Afghanistan, and I have had like all those kind of friends where their fathers and their male members they didn't support them in their education. For instance, they preferred them to do early marriages rather than going and pursuing their career. This is still happening in Afghanistan, but nobody is talking about that because I feel like even in those kind of situations, even that kind of ideological or patriarchy ideological, it transferred to women as well. Women start to normalizing that kind of situation as well. The only reason that Afghanistan was unstable so far is because of education. The majority of people are uneducated. If you see history of Afghanistan, a lot of modern governments, a lot of uh, good governments where the governments they brought reforms. Uneducated people or those people who preferred religion and tradition, they put religion and tradition as priority. They overthrown those governments. The only reason was people were uneducated. So this is why education plays an important part for both man and woman. If you want to see liberation for women, you have to educate that man in society as well. This is why in my organization we do not only prioritize women in our educational audience, but we also prioritize man as well. Because if we want uh, to remove or if we want to get rid of that cycle of patriarchy, oppression, and control, we have to educate man and as well. Woman education is somehow like important in our society. If we want to have educated mothers, if we want to stop early marriages, if we want to give good children or good man, educated man, not only educated man but also respectful man to the society, we have to educate both of them.
That's very true. That's why we are seeing hope
Mhm.
Iran now. When you we were talking about the headscarf, and there were so many videos from these couple of days removing headscarf and coming out against the regime and speaking up. So when you see this, what do you feel? Solidarity, hope, pain? Do you have hope for Afghanistan that one day Afghanistan will come to this momentum?
Well, I see a lot of hope for Afghanistan too. When I see Iran, they're resisting. I see a lot of hope for Afghanistan too. That one day we would have all these like Gen Z support, Gen Z resistance, and Gen Z protests. Not only Gen Zs, but every individual person in Afghanistan. This is not just about hijab or oppression, but sometimes it's about a country's economy as well, a country's progress as well. People in Afghanistan, they lost all their jobs. People in Afghanistan, they are dealing with a lot of a higher number of women, and we have like a lot of issues happening in Afghanistan. It's not just like the woman's side, but it's also this operation and control is for man and people overall in the society as well. And I feel like when it comes to taking off hijab and everything, I feel like as I told before, it's a choice, and we shouldn't use faith as a tool of violence, as a tool of oppression or control. Every faith in this world, it's beautiful, so we have to keep that beauty, and we shouldn't make that faith, or we shouldn't make that religion as a tool that to scare people or to bring fear among the society. And this is a tool that mostly authoritarian regimes they use religion, or they use other tools of means just to scare people, just to bring fear and violence among people. So they should have those people under their control. No other states or no other governments in the world, they should use faith or other means or other tools to control people or to bring fear and violence among people. There should be peace. When I mean peace, peace is not just absence of war. Peace in terms of opportunities, peace in terms of mental health, peace in terms of choices and decision making for people. I feel like all these regimes, they're all similar to North Korea. They're all similar to other dictatorship regimes where people are silent. They don't even speak up. And these rulers or these people who's governing those kind of society, they make decision on behalf of those people. This is why we prefer liberal democracy in Afghanistan, both in Afghanistan and Iran. And if we have that liberal democracy, we can even elect our through a fair and free election, which we didn't have that in Afghanistan in these 2 decades of war.
But to come to that point, you have to raise awareness among the
Mhm.
society in order to have reaction. And as we were saying, Taliban knows what they are doing. They are not letting, starting with girls to be educated in order not to have voice, in order not to have awareness and speak up and ask for their rights. Because if this generation right now is aware what is happening, you're going to have their own kids living in this as a normality, that girls cannot be educated or go to school or have a certain profession. So we know what is right, but we have to admit that these regimes are using religion to control women. So they are using it to say that you in Afghanistan, you cannot go outside without being accompanied by the man, right?
Yes, I mean, both the Taliban and the Iranian regime, they claim to the act of in the name of Islam. So I respond with that with the claim that I rejected completely. When they practice is political control is disguised as religion. Islam doesn't justify violence against women or silencing dissent or ruling through fear. And these regimes, they weaponize religion to legitimize authoritarianism. Even like when this comes to the idea of male chaperone, it's usually it's another act of oppression. It's another act of controlling and bringing fear and legitimizing violence among the society. And I feel like there should be like a secular government where there wouldn't be any religion mixed up with the politics. Because whenever religion is mixed up with the politics, people would always do everything in favor of their religion, and they will always oppress other people from other religions. So this is why a secular government would respect people from all religions.
Do you think that Western authorities and international community in general really understand what is happening in that part of the world?
Well, definitely they understand what's happening in that part of the world, and they keep normalizing that, and they treat women's operation as a cultural issue rather than a human rights crisis. Negotiating with regime while abandoning women, it's actually justifying that they are normalizing that kind of regime. And a stability without justice, it's not a peace.
So, what is the biggest failure of the international community when it comes to Afghanistan and Iran, according to you?
Well, according to me, there are multiple reasons that I see international community failed in Iran and Afghanistan. Whenever we talk about the international community, they always give us the reason of their humanitarian crisis. In these 2 decades of war, humanitarian crisis doesn't help. I feel like United Nations and a lot of international community organization, they failed in most of the conflicts in this world, in every part of the world. People have been killed. And if people are dying in Afghanistan or Iran, that kind of humanitarian work, it wouldn't solve the problem. The United Nations and a lot of international community organization, they keep funding our corrupt elites. They keep filling up the pockets of our corrupt elites, and we still see that in Afghanistan. They keep inviting all these corrupt women's rights activists to come and speak on our behalf in United Nations or other international community. So the only reason I would say that the only benefit that would give is to filling up the corrupt activists or the corrupt elites. They keep having a luxurious life while the women in Afghanistan have a kind of like they still face oppression, and they keep normalizing the situation. They keep sending a condemnation about the situation that's happening in Afghanistan. We don't need criticize, or we don't need condemns coming from the international community or the United Nations. We just need a real support and real action. It's not just being silent about the country's situation, but taking action. I told you before, even if they send us messages, or we see a lot of posts coming up from United Nations or other international community organization, they keep criticizing the Taliban, but there's no support. They keep listening whatever they are doing, and sometimes they even send their representative, or like sometimes they even normalize it somehow with the treatment that they do with the Taliban.
If they are
Especially if you see UNAMO's report, they want to just kind of like be neutral about Afghanistan situation or other UN organization, and United Nations is literally silent about that.
Why do you think there is this international agenda towards Afghanistan?
Because with their humanitarian work, they just want to kind of like have the Taliban have the de facto authority support. This is why they are silent. To have the This is how I feel. I mean, a lot of people keep telling me that the only reason they are supported, like they when they said like even the humanitarian aid, it's not enough for Afghanistan. There's a lot of corruption in that as well. But nobody knows the reason why international community is silent about Afghanistan so far. Maybe it's unknown. Now maybe like the superpowers, they need to intervene. Nobody knows the reason why international community is silent about most of the world's conflict. And as I told you before, humanitarian aid is not enough. If people are dying in a part of a world, or if people they keep oppressing in that part of the world, I feel like those humanitarian aid, it wouldn't help at all. And even in most of the female workers of the United Nations, or more the female workers from UNICEF or UNCHR, the majority of them, they cannot even work in Afghanistan under Taliban oppression. So I feel like it doesn't even make sense with the support, or with their silent about Afghanistan situation. And I feel like for me and for other Afghan women, for a lot of people, even if you go to, for a lot of people, like even in United States, I feel like United Nation is such a useless entity. They don't even do anything. I keep going to the United Nation events and high level events. We keep just talking about Afghanistan, but even sometimes I feel like even in those events we are silent. Even in those events, they don't send the people who deserve to be there. As I told you before, they just want to fill up the pockets of our corrupt elites. And throughout those 2 decades of war in Afghanistan, they just filled up the pockets of those corrupt elites. They have best cars, they have best life. They are still doing that. If you want to invite somebody in United Nations event to represent a massive number of women or young people back there in Afghanistan, at least you have to check their background. And most of them, they are involved with corruption. I know like a lot of them
So
who's
you are
from.
talking about the human rights activists coming from Afghanistan here. So
I
those
mean, that
are
most of them nowadays, they even live in abroad.
how they live
So
abroad.
they live in abroad.
What is the hope? You work with these girls and you provide online education from them with the organization that you founded. What is their hope? Do they look towards United States, towards Western community for help?
I feel like they don't like there's no hope for them. And whenever I talk with these women back home in Afghanistan, they don't see any future in Afghanistan. They don't have any hope. Like they literally lost all their hope from the United Nations or other Western countries. So I don't see any hope, to be honest.
What keeps you personally going when the cost of resistance is so high?
Well, I feel like the girl who told me that they're still studying in secret, the woman who says that your voice makes me feel less alone. As long as they're silent, I will not be silenced. So the only reason that it keeps me going would be all those girls who send me messages every day. My work and my support means a lot for them. And that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of courage to continue going.
Lamar, if you don't have anything to add, I'm gonna thank you for
My
being
pleasure.
a guest and for you're so young and still so courageous to speak up
Thank you.
for millions of girls in Afghanistan and from the safe place that you are living right now, but you are not stopping your activism. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Arbana.